We thought we were just checking the camera for answers, but what we saw changed everything. A small dog hit by a speeding car. No one stopped. No one saw. Until two wild bobcats appeared and did the unthinkable. They risked their lives, dragged his broken body from the road, guarded him for hours. Not pets, not trained, just pure instinctive loyalty to someone who wasn't even their own. This isn't just a rescue story. It's a story about love without language and heroes with fur. It began with something silent, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort but warns. The village road, usually calm under the morning sun, held no signs of chaos. Birds chirped lazily. A few bikes passed now and then. The sky was soft with early light, and the breeze carried nothing more than the usual scent of earth and dew. It seemed like any other day, until a small French bulldog was seen limping through a quiet yard. He moved like something broken. His body tilted at an unnatural angle, his steps shaky and uneven. His eyes, once wide and curious, were dim, clouded with pain. Each paw step looked like it cost him everything he had left. His name was Milo. Milo was well known in the neighborhood, a local favorite, full of life, always chasing butterflies, yapping at falling leaves, or clumsily chasing his own tail until he tumbled into a flower bed. The kids in the nearby houses loved him. The mailman gave him treats. Even the street cats tolerated his goofy presence. But this Milo, this limping, ghost-like version of him, was someone no one had seen before. Sarah and Jackson, Milo's humans, had just returned from running errands when they found him collapsed near the porch, panting heavily, his small body trembling. Panic hit instantly. Sarah dropped her bag. Jackson knelt beside Milo, gently touching his side. There were no obvious wounds, just bruises, a smear of dirt, and something else: shock, fear, exhaustion. They rushed him inside and called the vet. The soonest appointment was 2 hours away. While they waited, Jackson remembered something: the front yard surveillance camera. He ran to check the footage, hoping it might explain what had happened. What he saw changed everything. The video showed Milo in the yard earlier that morning, sniffing the breeze. His tail wagged. He looked calm. The street outside was quiet. Then, it happened. A blur. Tires. A screech. A car shot past the house, far too fast for the narrow lane. Milo had wandered too close to the gate. Maybe the latch wasn't fully closed. Maybe curiosity had tugged him forward. And just like that, he was struck. The footage froze Sarah where she stood. One moment, he was wagging his tail. The next, he was lying on the road, motionless. Minutes passed in the footage. Cars went by. No one stopped. No one saw him. And then, something appeared. Two figures, low to the ground, moving with intent. Bobcats. Scruffy and wild, they crossed into frame with a quiet grace. One larger, muscles taut under a coat of dusty orange-brown, a deep scar across his flank. The other smaller, limping slightly, her golden eyes scanning the road ahead. These bobcats weren't strangers to the neighborhood. Sarah had seen them a few times, fleeting shadows slipping between trees or pausing near the edge of the garden at dusk. Locals called them ghosts of the hill. Not tame, not threats, just quiet watchers of village life. But today, they didn't watch. They acted. In the footage, they approached Milo cautiously. The larger one stepped forward first, nose close to the pavement, sniffing Milo's fur. He nudged him once, then again. No response. The smaller one circled around his other side, eyes darting to the road where cars still zipped past. Sarah leaned in closer to the screen. Her hands trembled. The big bobcat, later named Leo, looked up suddenly, ears twitching. Then, in a move that no one could have predicted, he stepped into the street, straight into oncoming traffic. The smaller Bobcat followed, her body tense but determined. Her name would come later too, Bella. They planted themselves in the middle of the lane, two small animals standing in front of machines that could crush them in an instant. A car approached. It slowed, honked, swerved around. Still, Leo and Bella didn't move. They held their ground beside Milo's body like sentinels, guardians. And then, when the road cleared for just a moment, they began. Leo gripped Milo's harness gently in his jaws, tugging with effort. Bella pressed her side against Milo's, pushing with what little strength her small frame could offer. It was slow, painfully slow. Inch by inch, they dragged him out of danger. Sarah gasped as she watched. So did Jackson. No one had taught them to do this. No one had asked. They just did. By the time they reached the edge of the road, both Bobcats were panting, sides heaving. Leo collapsed briefly beside Milo. Bella let out a strange chirrup. Not a meow, not a growl. A sound filled with urgency, worry, desperation. And then, Milo moved. Just a twitch, a flick of a paw, but enough. Bella immediately leaned forward and licked his ear. Leo rose again and gently nudged his belly. They were trying to wake him, encourage him, tell him, "You're not alone." But Milo didn't rise. So they waited. The camera showed the three of them lying there for minutes, two wild creatures flanking a limp dog, their bodies forming a shield. When the footage ended, there were no sirens, no rescue teams, no dramatic human arrival. Just the silence of two animals who had refused to walk away. Back in the present, Milo let out a soft whimper on the couch. Sarah was already dialing the vet again. She couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen. Neither could Jackson. Not just the accident, but what came after. That night, when the vet confirmed Milo had no internal injuries, only bruising and shock, Sarah cried into Jackson's chest. Not out of relief alone, but out of awe, out of gratitude, out of something she couldn't quite name yet. The next morning, she placed a dish of food outside the gate. Not for Milo, but for Leo and Bella, the silent heroes who had done what no one else did. And just before sunset, two shadows appeared at the edge of the fig tree. They came at dusk, just as the sun began to melt into the hills. Two figures, low to the ground. One limped. The other moved with the worn dignity of someone who had carried weight far beyond his size. Sarah and Jackson watched from the living room window, barely breathing. The food dish sat where Sarah had left it, beneath the fig tree on the brick corner where sunlight lingered longest. The aroma of grilled chicken and kibble hung in the air. A peace offering. A thank you. Leo arrived first, his broad head lifting as he sniffed the air. Bella crept behind him, smaller and daintier, but sharp-eyed as ever. She paused at the edge of the yard, gaze sweeping across the porch, the window, the trees. A lookout, a protector. They didn't rush to eat. They waited, listened, watched. Only when they were satisfied that the space was still, safe, did they step forward, shoulder to shoulder just like the night before. They ate in silence. Every crunch of kibble sounded like something sacred. It wasn't just food. It was trust being tested, curiosity gently explored. Sarah had tears in her eyes again. Jackson whispered, "They came back." The next night they came again, and the night after that. It became a rhythm, sacred, quiet, almost ritualistic. The gate left slightly open, the food dish waiting in the same spot, the same hour, the same stillness. Sometimes Milo, still healing but gaining strength, would sit by the window, ears perked, tail thumping softly as he watched his rescuers. Once he let out a soft bark, not loud, not threatening, just a gentle woof of recognition. Leo and Bella froze instantly, but then something unexpected happened. They relaxed. They had seen him, recognized him, and perhaps, in their own wild way, felt something stir. Memory, familiarity, a bond born not of language, but of shared struggle. From that day on, they lingered a little longer after eating. On the third evening, Leo settled near the garden steps after his meal. He didn't sit on them, not yet, but closer than ever before. His injured leg curled under him like a sleeping scar. Bella stood beside a flower pot, tail flicking slowly, her eyes tracing every movement from within the house. Sarah stepped onto the porch. Not far, not fast, just close enough to let her presence be felt. She sat on the top step with a mug of tea, her movements calm and slow. Jackson joined her, sitting beside her in quiet support. No words, just warmth. And then, Sarah whispered something. "Thank you." Her voice barely broke the air, but both Bobcats turned their heads. They heard her. They didn't run. They didn't inch closer either. But they stayed. And sometimes, staying means more than stepping forward. That night, after the Bobcats left, Sarah and Jackson sat in silence on the porch, long after the food dish was empty. The last of the tea had gone cold in their mugs, but neither of them moved. The quiet felt different now, not heavy, not distant, but filled with something warm and unspoken. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. "They can't live out here forever," she said softly, gently stroking Milo's back as he rested on his blanket. Jackson looked up from his coffee. "You want to bring them in?" "Eventually," she nodded. "They saved Milo. That has to mean something." He didn't argue. Not because he wasn't cautious, but because he'd seen the same thing Sarah had. The way Leo stood in the road. The way Bella pushed with her tiny body. The way they waited. Heroes, he thought. That's what they were. Not animals. Not strays. Heroes. That afternoon, they went into the village, walking slowly through side streets and open fields with a small pouch of food and soft voices. They didn't call out. That wouldn't work. These weren't dogs or cats used to names or whistles. They were survivors. They came only when they felt safe. And somehow, maybe luck, maybe something deeper, they found them. Under a collapsed wooden plank behind an old tool shed, Leo and Bella lay curled together, half shielded from the sun. Their eyes opened in unison as Sarah crouched and placed a bowl of food near the edge. She didn't reach for them, didn't move further. She just placed the offering and sat quietly on the dirt path, letting her heartbeat slow. Leo moved first. He stood stiffly, his limp more noticeable after a long nap. He stretched and took a step forward. His amber eyes flicked toward Sarah's hands, her face, her stillness. Then he ate. Bella came next, her movements tighter, sharper, more guarded. But she followed, always near Leo, always shadowing his bravery. They didn't run. When the food was gone, Sarah rose and backed away slowly. She didn't look them in the eye, didn't speak, only gave them space. That night, something new happened. Instead of placing the food dish at the edge of the yard, Jackson moved it further in, closer to the fig tree. Then, without closing the gate, he scattered a few flakes of tuna in a light trail leading inward. In the garden corner, beneath a canopy of rustling fig leaves, he laid a soft blanket. A shallow bowl of water. A shaded corner that smelled of lavender and fresh grass. Then, like before, they waited. This time, Milo was with them. He sat between them on the porch, his tail thumping softly against Sarah's leg, his nose twitching every time the wind shifted. Then, footsteps. Soft, almost silent. Gravel shifted near the gate. Leo's silhouette appeared first, tall and lean, his shape golden in the last of the sun. Bella followed, slower, her steps cautious but curious. They paused at the entrance, noses in the air, and then they stepped inside. One step, then another. Leo's paws touched the stone path like he was entering sacred ground. Behind him, Bella crept low, her golden eyes flicking between shadows, her ears twitching at every breeze. They didn't rush, they didn't trust, but they moved forward, not away. Sarah and Jackson sat completely still, Milo nestled between them like a quiet ambassador. Leo reached the food first, his nose dipping into the ceramic bowl without hesitation. Bella circled once, twice, then followed. Their bodies remained tense, every muscle coiled for escape, but they didn't bolt. When Sarah shifted slightly, Bella froze. But Leo didn't flinch. That was the difference now. Leo had begun to see something more than danger. After the meal, the Bobcats didn't leave right away. They retreated only to the base of the tree, sitting in the mulch like statues, still alert, but less frantic. Their bodies faced the porch. Their eyes shimmered in the dusk light. Sarah dared to whisper again, "You're safe." Jackson placed his hand gently over hers. They left the gate open all night. At dawn, the food dish was empty. The blanket was ruffled. Paw prints, faint and dusty, were scattered across the path. That evening, the gate was opened wider. The food dish moved closer to the steps. A fresh trail of kibble led toward the garden room at the back of the house, a room once used for storing tools, now swept clean, its floor lined with blankets and the soft scent of rosemary and soap. Sarah placed one of Milo's old chew toys there, just in case. Milo watched everything, his eyes tracking the preparation with curiosity. His limp was improving, but he still moved carefully, his energy returning in cautious bursts. At dusk, the Bobcats returned again. But this time they stayed longer. They sniffed the toy, rubbed their faces lightly on the corner of the blanket. Bella lay down, just for a moment, and then sprang back up at a sound. But Leo remained near the steps, sitting like a guardian. Sarah took a chance. She stood slowly and walked to the garden door. Not close, but close enough to be seen. She opened it gently, letting the light from inside spill onto the grass. Then she stepped back. The invitation was clear. The Bobcats didn't enter. Not yet. But neither did they leave. They circled the doorway, sniffed the threshold. Bella even peered inside, her whiskers brushing the air like feelers on the edge of a dream. That night, when the food was finished, they didn't vanish into the trees. They curled up near the porch, not in it, but beside it, close enough to hear the soft sound of Sarah humming inside, close enough to smell the lavender soap from the garden room. Jackson peeked through the curtain and whispered, "They're staying." Sarah nodded. "We're not just feeding them anymore." "No," he agreed. "We're welcoming them." And for the first time, Leo closed his eyes fully to sleep, not in fear, but in rest. Morning came soft and slow. When Sarah opened the front door just after sunrise, the yard was quiet, almost too quiet. For a heartbeat, she wondered if it had all been a dream. But then, just beyond the fig tree, two shapes stirred beneath the fern bushes. Leo lifted his head first, blinking in the pale morning light. Bella remained curled tightly, her tail tucked under her body, but her eyes fluttered open as Sarah stepped onto the porch. Neither moved, neither ran. Sarah didn't speak. She only smiled and set the fresh bowl of food down beside the lavender path. Then she stepped back, letting the door close with a soft click behind her. Inside, Milo had already perked up, tail sweeping the floor with lazy excitement. He knew they were near. Later that day, Sarah made another change. The garden room door was left open, not wide, just enough to let air move through, enough to let the Bobcats know. This space is yours, if you want it. A clean water bowl rested just inside. A cozy stack of blankets, reshaped into a kind of nest, sat in the corner. She placed a few small treats beside the threshold. Nothing strong-smelling, just bits of boiled chicken and kibble Milo used to love. Evening arrived. The sky turned copper. Jackson lit the porch lantern. Leo and Bella came, but this time something was different. Leo didn't circle. He didn't hesitate. He padded past the fig tree, past the food dish, and straight toward the open doorway of the garden room. Bella followed close behind, her body low, her paws careful on the flagstones. They paused at the door, listened. Leo stepped inside, just one paw at first, then the rest of him. He sniffed the edges of the blanket nest, turned in a small circle and, to Sarah and Jackson's astonishment, lay down. Bella crept in a moment later, her golden eyes wide, her ears still twitching at every sound. But she joined him. She curled near his side, her head resting against the edge of the blanket pile. They didn't leave that night. Sarah gently closed the garden room door, not shut, but nearly so, just enough to hold the warmth in and keep the wind out. From the hallway window, she and Jackson watched in silence. The Bobcats lay motionless, not pacing, not alert, but resting. Truly resting. The kind of rest that only happens when the body believes it's finally safe. Milo wandered down the hall later and pressed his nose to the gap beneath the door. He sniffed once, then twice, and finally lay down in front of it, sighing into the floorboards like he understood everything. That night, no one dreamed of roads or horns or tire screeches. Only of breath, slow, steady, shared between three beings who, against all odds, had found one another. The wild was still in them, but so was trust. And trust, once it takes root, begins to bloom in every corner it's allowed to enter. The following days passed like a soft unfolding, quiet, deliberate, full of gentle progress. Leo and Bella didn't leave the garden room. They didn't try to escape. They didn't hiss or claw at the windows. Instead, they observed. They listened. They allowed the rhythms of the house to wash over them like waves on a cautious shore. Jackson left the door ajar each morning and sat nearby with a book, his presence steady and non-threatening. Sarah brought fresh food at regular times, always placing it a few feet closer. They never forced touch, never cornered, just offered consistency, the kind of consistency wild things never get. Leo was the first to change. He began accepting food from the bowl even when Sarah sat only a few feet away. He no longer flinched at her footsteps. His ears still twitched, yes, but he didn't back away. He would eat, then curl up again, watching her from beneath half-lowered lids. Bella took longer. She remained more cautious, always watching from behind the potted fern near the door. Her eyes flicked at every shadow. Her paws never fully relaxed. But she didn't hide. She didn't growl. She was waiting, testing, measuring the distance between fear and hope. By the sixth morning, a small miracle occurred. Bella stepped forward. She didn't approach the food, not immediately. She approached Sarah, just close enough to sniff her outstretched hand. A delicate motion, like testing the edge of a flame. Sarah didn't move. She barely breathed. Bella sat. Not for long, just long enough for Sarah's throat to tighten, for her chest to ache with how gently this wild heart was beginning to trust her. Jackson came into the room later carrying something new, an open carrier padded with fleece blankets and one of Milo's plush toys. Not a cage, not a trap, a safe vessel. They knew it was time. That afternoon, Sarah made the call. The local vet clinic had worked with wildlife before. Dr. Joan, a silver-haired woman with kind, tired eyes, agreed to see them both privately, away from the usual bustle. Transporting them wasn't as difficult as expected. Leo walked into the carrier without resistance, his frame curling comfortably into the padded space as if he understood this was part of something good. Bella hesitated, but when she saw Leo calm, her tension eased. She followed. At the clinic, Dr. Joan moved slowly, her voice soft like wind in tall grass. She knelt beside the carrier and said, "Let's see what you've been through." Leo was first. His limp was examined carefully. The x-rays showed what they feared, an old fracture likely from a trap or impact that had healed wrong long ago. Nothing could be done to fix it, but he wasn't in pain. He simply walked differently, with a quiet strength. Dr. Jones smiled. "He walks like a soldier," she said. Sarah nodded. "Because he is one." Now it was Bella's turn. She didn't growl, she didn't claw, but she trembled slightly when the water touched her fur. Not in fear of pain, but from memories of cold nights and running from things she couldn't outrun. Her eyes, wide, golden, rimmed with long dark lashes, watched every movement. Sarah sat close, never touching, but murmuring softly. Just presence, just calm. Bella allowed it. Dr. Joan took her time. She gently trimmed the mats tangled into Bella's hindquarters. Old scratches emerged beneath the layers, not fresh wounds, but quiet reminders of battles fought under moonlight and rain. Each one told a story of survival. When it was done, Bella looked different, radiant. Her fur, once dusty and coarse, was now sleek and shimmering, a warm, dusky gold that glowed under the clinic's soft lights. She looked like something born of autumn leaves and candlelight. She was dewormed, vaccinated, checked for everything: ticks, heartworms, infections. The tests came back clean. Somehow, against every odd, she had stayed healthy. Dr. Joan leaned against the counter and said quietly, "These two have been through the kind of life that should have broken them." Jackson, who had stood silent most of the time, finally spoke. "It didn't," and Sarah added, "They saved Milo. Now we saved them." When the visit was over, they didn't carry the Bobcats out in closed crates. Leo stepped into the carrier again, calm and easy. Bella followed, not rushed, but with eyes that flicked once to Sarah before entering. That glance was everything. They returned to the house just as the golden hour hit, the kind of soft light that turns windows into honey and leaves into fire. The garden room had been cleaned again, the nest fluffed, fresh blankets, a dish of food waiting with a splash of broth. But this time something felt different. It wasn't just a room anymore. It was theirs. That night, Leo curled on the soft bed without hesitation. His body no longer curled tightly but stretched out, spine long, paws relaxed, tail soft over his hip. Bella circled once, then twice, before settling near the window, where the moonlight touched the floor. They slept. No pacing, no watching the door, no guard rotation between shadows and silence. They just slept. In the hallway, Milo snored softly on his blanket. Sarah watched them from the doorway, hand resting lightly on the frame. Jackson stood behind her, his chin on her shoulder, both of them held together by something greater than they'd expected when this all began. "You think they'll stay?" Jackson asked. Sarah didn't answer right away. Instead, she whispered, "They already have." And she wasn't wrong, because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives like this, in the way a body relaxes under clean sheets, in the soft quiet between breaths, in the space where fear used to live. They weren't just recovering anymore. They were becoming family. The morning sun crept through the garden room windows in soft golden streaks. Leo was already awake, stretched luxuriously across the fleece bed, blinking slowly at the fluttering curtains. Bella stirred beside him, her tail twitching at the scent of morning. Neither moved with urgency. Not anymore. The tension in their muscles had become something else. Familiarity, comfort, routine. A quiet knock came at the garden room door. It was Milo. He didn't bark. He didn't scratch. He just waited. The tip of his nose pressed against the lower corner like he was trying to remember something forgotten but deeply felt. Jackson opened the door slowly. Milo stepped inside on his own. The moment stretched. Leo stood first, his scarred leg stiff but balanced. He looked at Milo and let out a low, chuffing sound. Not aggressive, not warning. Just recognition. Bella approached cautiously, her head low, her tail flicking. Milo didn't move. He simply looked at her, then at Leo, his eyes soft with something deeper than memory. Then, with no signal or command, Milo stepped forward and gently nuzzled Bella's side. She didn't flinch. She leaned in. Leo moved next, placing one paw forward and brushing his head lightly against Milo's chest. Milo responded with a soft woof, tail wagging, body quivering with relief and joy. The three of them sat there, a tangle of fur, scars, and survival. It was as if no words were needed, because something else spoke louder. The shared silence of that road, the breathless drag toward safety, the hours spent beside a still body, refusing to leave. They remembered. Even if they couldn't explain it, they remembered. From that moment on, they were inseparable. Leo took to the backyard like it had always been his kingdom. He moved slowly. Yes, the limp never left, but with dignity. He would lay under the old orange tree, blinking at passing clouds, one paw tucked beneath him like a noble guardian. Bella liked the porch, especially in the afternoon when warm laundry sat in baskets and curtains fluttered in the breeze. She'd perch near the windowsill or the edge of the garden bed, always watching, always alert, but never fearful. Milo? He thrived. His limp improved. His energy returned. And his spirit, that playful, clumsy joy he was known for, came rushing back like a river released. But he was never far from them. He brought toys to the garden room. He curled beside Bella when she sunbathed. He even shared his favorite squeaky pig with Leo, who, in an astonishing moment, gave it one hard swat and sent it tumbling. Milo went wild. Jackson laughed out loud. Sarah wept again, but this time it was pure joy. "You saved him," she whispered to the Bobcats one evening as they dozed beside Milo on the patio. Leo opened one eye. Bella didn't move, but they heard her. They always did. It didn't take long for word to spread. A bobcat sunbathing with a French bulldog on a garden chair? Unbelievable. But there they were. Leo sprawled like a lazy king. Bella curled delicately at Milo's side. The three of them a portrait of impossible peace. Neighbors began to slow their steps as they passed the gate. Some came on foot, pretending to check their phones, glancing up to steal a look. Others whispered to one another at the corner store. "Did you hear?" The wild cats live with them now. And the dog? He's fine. He plays with them. Jackson and Sarah didn't invite the attention. They didn't post about it or turn it into a story. They simply lived it, quietly, gratefully, honestly. And still, the story told itself. One afternoon, a local school teacher left a note by the gate. "May we bring the children one morning to watch from outside? They won't disturb. Just a moment to see kindness with fur." Sarah read it twice, her heart soft. She left a reply. "Yes," quietly. "They'll be in the sun at 10. That next morning, 10 small children stood along the fence, hands clasped behind their backs, their voices hushed with wonder. Milo was the first to appear, trotting onto the patio with his tail up and his favorite toy in his mouth. Leo followed, stretching in the sunlight, his green collar shining like a badge. Bella came last, elegant and cautious but calm. The children didn't squeal, they didn't shout, they simply stared, wide-eyed. One girl whispered to her teacher, "Are they magic?" And though no one answered, the silence was full of yes. Back inside, Sarah watched from the kitchen window as the trio settled on their usual sunspot. She turned to Jackson and said, "I think this is bigger than us now." Jackson nodded. It always was. That afternoon, as they prepared for dinner, the doorbell rang. It was Dr. Joan, holding an envelope and wearing a puzzled look. "I thought you'd want to see this," she said, handing Sarah the x-rays from Leo's checkup. Something unusual showed up near his shoulder. Sarah opened the envelope, and her breath caught. There, just beneath Leo's muscle, invisible to the eye but clear on the scan, was a small, jagged object, a piece of metal. A bullet fragment? Jackson guessed, eyes narrowing. Joan nodded slowly. It's old, not dangerous anymore. But yes, probably from years ago. He survived a gunshot. Silence hung between them. "He's been through so much," Sarah whispered. Joan placed a hand on her shoulder. And still, he saved someone else. That night, Jackson took out a paintbrush and a small wooden board. He carved and painted it by hand, then placed it gently just outside the gate. It read, "Heroes live here." Not for show, not for sympathy, but because it was true. Leo, Bella, Milo, survivors, saviors, family, and the world was finally beginning to see them as they truly were. Weeks passed, not with spectacle or fanfare, but in soft, sacred routine. Each morning, Leo would rise early, stretching on the patio before settling beneath the old fig tree. His eyes followed birds lazily from branch to branch, but he never chased them. He wasn't interested in prey anymore. He had found something better. Peace. Bella loved mornings too, but in her own way. She preferred the sun-drenched hallway rug just beyond the kitchen, the one that always smelled faintly of fresh bread and warm socks. She would curl there for hours, barely blinking, listening to the quiet hum of the household. Milo healed fast, faster than the vet had expected. His limp faded with each day, and his energy returned in waves. But what came back the strongest was his light. That silly, unfiltered joy that made him leap at dust motes or run in dizzy circles around Leo until the older Bobcat let out a single, exaggerated paw swipe that sent Milo yipping in delight. Sometimes, Milo would drag one of his plush toys, a chewed-up squeaky carrot, a floppy blue elephant, and place it gently beside Leo's paw. Leo didn't always respond, but when he did, when he reached out and batted it once, or rolled to his side in mock play, Milo's whole body wiggled with happiness. Bella didn't play, not exactly, but she joined in her own way. She'd sit nearby, tail flicking, golden eyes bright, watching the two of them with a calm that said, "You are safe. I am here." Sarah began to write again. Not stories, just thoughts. Fragments of moments she didn't want to forget. A paw print in the fresh soil. The way Bella blinked slowly when Sarah walked by. The exact sound of Milo's first bark after his recovery. Soft, surprised, like he couldn't believe his voice had returned. Jackson took photos, but never shared them publicly. He printed them out and placed them in a small notebook they kept on the kitchen counter. A private archive. A memory map. Proof that miracles didn't always shout. Sometimes they arrived on four paws and rested in sunbeams. evenings were sacred. The three animals would gather on the porch like old friends, each in their usual place. Leo on the wicker chair, Bella on the welcome mat. Milo flopped sideways on the warm wood planks. Sarah would sit with a book. Jackson with tea. Sometimes they didn't speak for hours, because silence, when it's chosen, when it's shared, is its own kind of language. One evening, after a long nap in the sun, Bella climbed into Sarah's lap. Just like that. No hesitation. Her paws were feather-light against Sarah's robe, her nose tucking beneath her arm like a child seeking shelter. Sarah didn't move. She didn't speak, but her tears came, soft, quiet, unrelenting, tears of gratitude, of awe, of knowing that trust, once broken, can still be rebuilt, not with force, but with patience, with love, with time. It happened without anyone counting. The days folded into each other, the way warm sheets gather on a bed just made. The scars faded, the muscles softened, and the shadows beneath their eyes slowly disappeared. But on the 100th morning since the accident, though no one had marked a calendar or set a reminder, the light felt different. It spilled through the trees in golden ribbons. The air hummed with the scent of wildflowers. And all three animals, Leo, Bella, and Milo, gathered in the yard as if called by something they couldn't name. Sarah noticed first. She stepped outside with her coffee, pausing at the door as her breath caught in her throat. Leo sat in the patch of grass near the base of the old fig tree, his injured paw tucked beneath him. Bella was curled beside Milo in the sun, her eyes half-lidded in lazy peace. Milo, now nearly fully healed, rolled to his side with a grunt, pushing his back gently into Bella's chest like a child seeking warmth. Jackson came to stand beside Sarah, wrapping an arm around her waist. "They look content," he said. Sarah nodded. "They look like they've always belonged here." And in a way, they had. What had started with blood and fear, the screech of tires, the limp body in the road, had turned into something soft, something sacred. A miracle not born of magic, but of decision, of instinct, of refusal to abandon. That afternoon, as dew still clung to the grass and the village hummed with quiet life, a butterfly landed on Leo's water bowl. He didn't move. Neither did Bella. Even Milo stilled, his head tilting just slightly, watching the fragile wings flutter in the light. It was, in every way, a perfect moment. And then came a sound from down the road, the soft shuffle of shoes on gravel. A woman walking slowly, holding a canvas bag at her side. She paused at the gate. Her eyes took in the scene. She smiled. And then, softly, she said, "I heard about the Bobcats." Sarah turned. "Would you like to meet them?" The woman hesitated. "Only if I won't scare them." "You won't," Sarah said. "They're not scared anymore." She opened the gate. The woman stepped in quietly. She didn't approach too fast. She didn't speak again. She simply knelt a few feet from where the animals lay and watched. Leo opened one eye. Bella raised her head slightly. And Milo, the one who had started it all, the one who had once lain broken in the middle of the road, stood and walked to her. He sniffed her hand, let her touch his head, then turned and looked back at Leo and Bella, and the woman whispered, "They saved you, didn't they?" Milo didn't answer, of course, but his silence said everything. Evening came with long shadows and a sky brushed in shades of lavender and fire. The house glowed from within, not with grand lights, but with warmth, the kind that comes from safe routines and souls that trust one another. Milo lay stretched in the center of the living room, one paw curled over his beloved blue elephant. His breathing was slow, steady. Beside the open patio door, Leo and Bella rested side by side, their bodies gently rising and falling with sleep. They had eaten together. They had walked the yard together. Now they dreamed together. Sarah and Jackson sat curled on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, their mugs warm between their hands. The Heroes Live Here sign still stood outside the gate, but now it had been joined by something else. A small wooden plaque that simply read, Grace. Not because of religion, not because of style, because that's what had taken root here. Grace, the silent kind, the kind that pulls broken bodies from roads and watches over them through the night, the kind that waits for fear to fade, the kind that doesn't demand anything in return, the kind that survives bullets and betrayal, and still chooses love. Weeks turned to months. Leo's limp never vanished, but it became something else, a signature. A slow, steady swagger that reminded everyone he was strong, not because he never suffered, but because he kept walking anyway. Bella remained observant, still sharp, still a shadow in motion, but now her movements had softness. She liked sitting on the windowsill in the early afternoon, watching the world pass by without needing to run from it. Milo was whole again. His fur gleamed. His tail wagged like it had never known pain. He barked now and then, not from fear, but from excitement, when birds chirped too loudly, or when Bella startled at the sound of the post truck, and Leo leapt protectively in front of her. Their bond became legend. Not because of spectacle, but because of truth. The quiet kind. The village changed a little. People looked at strays differently, at silence differently. Children waved as they passed the gate. Letters were left in the mailbox sometimes, thank yous from strangers who had seen a video clip or heard the story whispered from one town to the next. But Sarah and Jackson never told it for fame. They told it for remembrance. Because some stories are not meant to be viral, they're meant to be kept. On the porch, the light flickered gently. Leo slept curled near the door. Bella lay beside Milo's bed, her paws tucked under her chin, tail rising and falling in slow rhythm. And in the quiet that held them all, the humans, the Bobcats, the dog, the house, one truth echoed softly. Sometimes heroes have fur. And sometimes love looks like dragging a friend across the road, not because you have to, but because you can't imagine leaving them behind.